to the new Bilibid prison at Muntinlupa City. Chicago School Studies. Crime and delinquency co-occur with other social problems in community, poverty, dilapidated housing, and residential instability. Robert Sampson, Stephen Rodenbush, and Felton Ertz argue that social cohesion and networks may be necessary but not sufficient for social control, and what is missing is the key factor of purposive action. So then, let's proceed to the next topic, which is the forms of punishment. Different types of criminal punishment are the following. And first is incapacitation. Incapacitation seeks to prevent future crime by physically moving criminals away from society. This punishment can be traced to ancient times. Terence Smith and Hong Lu write in Punishment, a comparative historical perspective. Punishment was a common for colonizing European countries to ship convicts and undesirable overseas. In modern times, house arrest, incarceration, and the death penalty are all forms of incapacitation. Number 2, findings by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, or BGS, have brought the effectiveness of this method into question. According to BGS data, about two-thirds, 67.8% of prisoners released back into society were arrested for the new crime within 5 years. Despite these findings, incapacitation is a common form of punishment in the United States. Number 2, deterrence. The goal of deterrence is to persuade citizens and possible offenders or reoffenders to conform to the rules of law. Smith and Lu explain that 4 types of deterrence are generally recognized. Specific deterrence analyzes how effective punishment is on an individual's future behavior. General deterrence seeks to understand how individual punishment can deter others from committing crimes. Marginal deterrence seeks to reconcile how effective different types of punishment are as either specific or general deterrence. Partial deterrence refers to situations in which the threat of penalty has some deterrent value even when someone engages in illegal behavior. For example, a criminal simply robbing a victim instead of also causing physical harm. The effective of deterrence as a criminal punishment is difficult to assess because people may follow the law for other reasons that may be challenging to track, such as religious or moral beliefs, physical incapacitation, or lack of opportunity. Number 3, retribution. As one of the oldest forms of punishment, retribution has roots in the Judeo-Christian tradition of justice. In her book, Criminal Law, Lisa M. Storm explains that retribution prevents crime by giving victims or society a certain sense of satisfaction that a defendant has been punished appropriately, reinforcing the belief that the criminal justice system is working effectively. Modern examples of retribution include the widespread practices of imposing fines as well as enforcing mandatory sentencing policies for certain offenses under the law. As an effective punishment, retribution has been criticized as being overly rigid and limited in its capacity to change societal behavior. However, it remains popular. Number 4, rehabilitation. A common prison policy in America up until the 1970s, rehabilitation focuses on helping criminals and prisoners overcome the barriers that led them to committing criminal acts. This includes developing occupational skills as well as resolving psychological issues such as addiction, and aggression explain the American Psychological Association considered the opposite of retribution. The ultimate purpose of rehabilitation is to transition offenders back into society. The APA reports that in examining massive data, individualized approaches to crime completed with community-based approaches can prove effective in reducing offender recidivism. Number 5, restoration. A radically different approach to criminal punishment. The goal of restoration is for the offender to make direct amends to both the victim and the community in which the crime was committed. Although a relatively new practice in modern times, the concept of restorative justice can be found in the early legal systems of Western Europe, ancient Hebrew justice, and pre-colonial African societies. During the process of restoration, victims initiate a process in which both they and the offender meet to share feelings and concerns. The dialogue offers victims the opportunity to be heard and the offender to make amends and receive forgiveness. Restorative justice is often used in crimes involving youth offenders. So let's proceed to the next topic, which is the Age of Enlightenment. Age of Enlightenment is also known as the Age of Reason, or simply the Enlightened, was an intellectual and philosophical movement that determined the world of ideas in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. The Enlightenment included a range of ideas centered on the pursuit of happiness, sovereignty of reason, and the evidences of the senses as the primary sources of knowledge, and advanced ideals such as liberty, progress, toleration, fraternity, constitutional government, and separation of church and state. An 18th century intellectual movement whose three cultural concepts were the use of reason, the scientific method, and progress. Enlightenment thinkers believed they could help create better societies and better people. Their belief was strengthened by some modest improvements in economic and social life during the 18th century. These are the Enlightenment philosophers whose John Locke, Charles Montesquieu, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The Age of Enlightenment was a philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe in 18th century. Centered on the idea that reason is primary source of authority and legitimacy, this movement advocated such ideals as liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, and separation of church and state. Two distinct lines of Enlightenment thought: radical Enlightenment, moderate variety. French historians usually place the period between 1715 and 1789, from the beginning of the reign of Louis XV until the French Revolution. In the middle 17th century in France, many cities, the publication of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica in 1687. Some historians and philosophers have argued that the beginning of the Enlightenment is when Descartes shifted the epistemological basis from external authority to internal certainty by his Cogito ergo sum 1637. National varieties in France and in Germany. The Enlightenment took hold in most European countries, often with a specific local emphasis. For example, in France, it became associated in anti-government